Hi once again to all of our listeners and welcome. It's now time for the big story of the morning. And we have carried a story on it earlier. The fact is, we are waking up to the good news that this strike has been averted, at least for now, until sometime in January, as negotiations are continuing. But there was, in fact, a massive strike by U.S. East Coast and Gulf Coast dock workers. It began on the 1st of October and was affecting about half of the United States' ocean shipping. The strike resulted from failed negotiations between the International Longshoremen's Association, the ILA, and the United States Marine Alliance, USMX, over wages and automation. It was affecting some 14 major ports from Maine to Texas and would have resulted, if it were to continue, in shortages and increased prices and also having the potential to impact inflation. How might that have affected Jamaica had it prolonged? Well, that is what we want to be talking about this morning with the man we call Mr. Donovan Wignall, who is the CEO of Mairtrans International Logistics Limited. Good morning, Mr. Wignall, and welcome to the program. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Richard B. Good morning to your listeners in the diaspora, UK and the USA, and Canada, Jamaica, all over the world. I'm fine, thank you.
I'm
happy this morning that the strike is at least suspended for now.
Yes, it is a very good news to wake up to. And because a strike like this, Mr. Wignall, it could have serious impacts on our economy, especially an import-dependent economy like Jamaica now, wouldn't you say?
Yes, absolutely, but more so for the United States economy and for all of those areas that the port facilities are located. The implications for Jamaica is that a lot of the cargo, probably 80% of the cargo that goes to the east coast of the United States and the Gulf states, transit through the Panama Canal and is transshipped most of the time through Jamaica to the United States and the rest of the region. So what would have happened is that all those containers coming from the Far East through the canal would have been hung up in Jamaica and would have caused a serious bottleneck in the port of Kingston. And that would have translated to serious implications for the Jamaican economy. One, because none of our export containers would have been able to go into that part of the United States, and we would have seen the import containers coming in from the United States from that region would not be able to reach Jamaica. So you can think about raw materials for manufacturing, goods that are supposed to be heading into Jamaica for the Christmas season.
Yes,
and you would have seen if this had continued, a serious increase in the freight rates, which would have had a very deleterious effect on our inflation rate, because once the price of freight goes up, the price of the commodities that are shipped goes up. And prices in Jamaica, including fuel, right across the board, everything, would have skyrocketed almost to the levels of COVID.
Wow. So
those are the implications. It would have been catastrophic for the United States in terms of, 50% of their cargo we wouldn't have been able to go into the markets that they were destined. So that would have been a serious problem. They would have found themselves in a serious conundrum if this wasn't averted, Richie.
The fact that the strike lasted just about 3 days, though, was that enough to cause any impact on imports into Jamaica, do you think?
Well, not significantly. It had some impact. You would have seen, we got messages from the Port of Kingston that they will not be receiving any cargo destined for the United States, simply because, of course, as I said before, those containers have been sitting in Jamaica until the strike was lifted. But the time span, it is just in time. The strike was averted or was lifted just in time to avoid any major impact. Just, it's minimal at this point in time. But if it had continued, we would have had serious problems.
I'm always interested to find out when we see stuff like this happening, whether or not there are like alternative shipping routes or ports that Jamaican importers could consider during these kinds of strike actions.
Well, there is always the west coast of the United States. Of course, as I said before, it would have had freight implications. So the vessels that would have reported on the east coast and the Gulf states of the United States would have had to go further west and up north to the west coast, Los Angeles, etc. So the additional journey that the vessels would have had to make would have caused increased cost in shipping. And of course, the cargo that would have been destined for the east coast of the United States that went to the west would have had to be moved by rail or road, been trucked across the United States, which also would have increased the prices as well. As far as coming into Jamaica, the cargo leaving the East Coast would have been at the East Coast already. So that definitely would have been delayed until the strike is lifted. So, I mean, you know, depending on where you are and where the cargo is coming from, the implication would have been more serious based on the location.
Now, what contingency plans can Jamaican businesses sort of implement to mitigate supply chain disruptions like these kinds of strikes that we saw?
Well, there are always alternative supply areas. During COVID, some of those solutions would have had to be implemented. A lot of the cargo that was bought from the Far East and the United States were sourced from South America. So a lot of the building materials now, new markets were found, and you know it presented an opportunity as well for local purchasing officers to find alternate source of supplies from South America. Some of those sources are still in play, and we are the South American market open. So what has to happen? That in supply chain solutions, you have to always look at alternative routes for getting your cargo in, alternative sources of supplies, and sometimes when you have sole source, then you are stuck with whomever you are getting your cargo from. But with the lessons learned over COVID and even with this, people would have worked out where their alternatives are over time, and it's always necessary to have a plan B when you have when you're in supply chain.
And for the exporters, what strategies would you suggest that they use to minimize losses due to strikes?
Well, you know what? Unfortunately for exporters, wherever your markets are, you're really stuck with those. So if, for example, a manufacturer in Jamaica, say for example, that was manufacturing furniture or sending akis or yam or whatever produced from Jamaica into, for example, New York, or Atlanta. For those ports that would have been impacted are closed, and your markets are in and around those areas, you would have had serious problems. So finding alternate markets for your supplies is always good. You probably would supply less cargo to the areas, meaning that, you know, if you can't sell to one area, you have to sell to another. So it's always good to find additional areas for selling your cargo. So your whole marketing team would have had to have plan B for purchases of the cargoes or the produce coming out of Jamaica. So it's always good to have multiple areas where you can sell your cargo.
Yeah. And as it relates to even your own business at Mairtrans International Logistics, this strike now, did it impact you in any way on a personal level?
Well, not really, Richard. And I'll tell you something. In every adversity, there is always opportunity. So first and foremost for me, I always look for an opportunity to do additional business or open new frontiers where we can get additional business from. So fortunately for us, the strike has been suspended. The implications are such that we would have been getting a lot more requests to find alternate routes for shipping. So in shipping and logistics, situations like these do present opportunities to the people who provide these kind of services. And that's just how it is. you look for additional opportunities to provide alternatives to your clients. And that, fortunately for us, sometimes make you additional revenue.
All right, all right. I'm glad to hear, and that's a good note on which to end. I want to thank you this morning for coming on and sharing thoughts with us, Donovan, and have a good day. All the best.
You're most welcome, Richard.
All
and
right.
Same to you and all your listeners across the world.
All right. Thank you so very much.